Today, I'm taking a look at the Stryd Footpod after 1,000 miles. 4.39 miles, 9 minutes, 37 seconds per mile today. Taking it just super relaxed, nice and easy. My first run after the marathon that I ran last weekend. Just wanted to get the blood flowing and kind of do a systems check. Make sure nothing's hurting any more than it should be at this point and get an idea for whether there's anything that needs more attention. I think kind of my left hamstring down towards the knee is a little bit tighter. It's probably the thing that's bothering me the most right now. So I'll probably try to do a little bit of extra stretching there. But the main thing I want to talk about today is this Stryd Footpod that I've been running with since January 25th, which was the first run that I ran with this device, till June 12th, which was the date of the running footage that you just saw. And I wanted to see ultimately if it could deliver on its promise that it would help you predictably set new PRs. And the main way that it does that is that this device clamps onto your shoe, and by being on your shoe as a Footpod, it can get different data and metrics that it can then use to help you train, but also to help you race. And some of the things that it can collect is things like a power rating. It tells you how kind of hard you're working, regardless of whether you're going uphill or downhill, whether it's windy or cold. How hard are you working? What's your cadence? How many strides are you taking per minute? Your elevation, ground contact time, vertical oscillation, all sorts of data fields that I admit I really don't understand. I'm not a super hardcore analytics guy when it comes to running metrics, which seems a little bit surprising, I think, for me to realize that. But a lot of that data I just don't really understand all that well, and I'm not all that interested in. But the power number was something that I was particularly interested in because of the way that I've struggled late in longer races like the marathon, where in 2017 at the Chicago Marathon, I definitely bonked right around like mile 19 really early. It's because I just went out too fast, went out too hard, and I had nothing left for the end. And it's not just I had nothing left. You kind of fall off a cliff, so to speak, and you just can't recover once you do that in a long distance marathon like a race. So even if you walk a whole bunch, drink a whole bunch of extra water, you're not going to come back. And so that's the main thing that I wanted to avoid, and that's why I was really interested in this power reading. And I've taken this thing with me on all of my runs through extremely cold conditions, running through the polar vortex in Chicago when we had record-setting lows this year, and through wet conditions, rain, tons of water. I run through water pretty much every opportunity I get, and just on all my other daily runs. And so, or almost daily runs. I try to run about 6 times per week, or I usually try to shoot for like 13 out of 14 days in terms of how frequently I run. And this little guy has been with me pretty much every single time. And to kind of condense all of that training into a short video for YouTube, I think there's kind of like 4 scenarios that I really want to talk about. One will be my general like run commute. 2 will be a short distance race. I ran the Shamrock Shuffle earlier this year. 3 will be the time I actually got some elevation, at least as far as I'm concerned. It was a lot of elevation when I was out running the hills in Scottsdale, Arizona. And the 4th will be the marathon that I just ran. And so first I'll talk about kind of run commuting. And the reason why I want to talk about that is that's probably the most frequent type of run that I did, or just running here kind of on my home turf. And when I paired this guy with the Apple Watch, what it does is it then gets pace and also distance data from the Footpod itself, because it can kind of detect how far it moves between each stride, and it knows how far you're moving and how quickly you're moving over that distance. So then it kind of takes over that activity from the Apple Watch. So the Apple Watch isn't doing that. The Apple Watch is necessary to both collect GPS information. So when I want to see the tracing of my route on a map, that's where the Apple Watch comes in. And also the Apple Watch is kind of like the collector and aggregator. This doesn't have any way of telling me information that it's collecting me real time unless I'm looking at it through the watch. So then you're using the Stryd app to be able to collect information from the Stryd Footpod. And I would say that for difficult GPS situations, like in an urban area, I really enjoyed having the Stryd Footpod, because it would then give me pace and distance information that I felt was more accurate than I could get through any GPS watch that I've ever used. And I've used both the Apple Watch on these routes that I've run and also the Garmin Vivo Active 3. And between those two, I really generally like the pace and distance information that I'm getting from the Stryd Footpod. So I really enjoyed having it on a day-to-day basis. And then in terms of when I was doing a short race, I had kind of some mixed results in terms of my experience with the Stryd Footpod. Now, one of the things that it can do is it can give you like predictors in terms of that power number that I was talking about on how hard you're working. And so for something like the Shamrock Shuffle, I'd never raced an 8K before, so I had no idea what kind of like pace I could run. I had set a 5K PR the year before I had the Stryd Footpod of 1943, 1942, something like that. So like a little bit below 6.5 minutes per mile, but that was for a 5K. So I didn't really know what that would translate to for an 8K. So I kind of went off what the Stryd Footpod was telling me, or what the Stryd app was telling me in terms of predictors. And it was telling me to run somewhere in the 260s. I think 263 was what it was telling me to run. And so I had set, there's something you can do on the watch as you start each activity. You can tell it to give you reminders when you are too far, either not working hard enough or working too hard in terms of a race. I had set that for the race, and I ran the race, and I don't think I noticed it giving me any warnings or indicators at all. And I end up running that race in 31:59 for the 8K or 5 miles. And my average power was like 275 for that race. So I was way above what Stryd was telling me would be a good number for me to run without falling apart. I was able to well exceed that. So in that sense, I think that the Stryd, if I'd followed that more closely, I would have very much underperformed according to what I was capable of doing on that particular day. And the other thing was I don't know that the Apple Watch or any watch can give me kind of like vibratory notifications of that type that I would be able to kind of detect or discern while trying to run an 8K where there's just a lot of huffing and puffing. And there was a ton of people for that race. It's one of the biggest races in Chicago. The next time that I used the Stryd Footpod, I had a much better experience than with the Shamrock Shuffle. For the Shamrock Shuffle, it's not that I had a bad experience. It didn't help. I didn't notice that it was there, but for Phoenix or Scottsdale and Phoenix, I'm not that familiar with Arizona geography, but they seem to be kind of like one kind of big city-ish area. And anyway, it's in Scottsdale's up in the hills, running up there. And I have no idea how to pace myself when it comes to elevation. I normally run in Chicago along the lake. There's almost zero elevation change on any given run that I go on. But when I was up there, I was just working really hard the first day and just exhausted, and I felt like I was doing everything wrong. And so for the second day, I was like, all right, let's try to figure out, I looked at some of my previous historical data. What do my moderate to moderate easy runs look like power-wise? And I was looking at it, and I thought maybe anywhere between 210, 220 was a good moderate easy day run. And I had 3 days in a row that I kind of wanted to have a buffet of running in the hills, because I was going to be in there in Scottsdale for 3 days. And so I didn't want to do anything too hard, overexert myself, and then not have anything left for the final day. So I picked 210, 220 for all the climbing. And whatever pace that was the how fast I was going to go, and that kind of gave me an idea of how hard I should be working. And once I started doing that, that really worked out very well for me. And I really enjoyed having the Stryd Footpod on that particular day because it worked out well. I was able to climb to the peak of that hill or mountain. I'm going to call it a mountain because it's a mountain to me. I think I had like maybe 12 or 1,400 feet of elevation gain that day, which is a lot for me. That's usually what I get in like a month. And then I was able to come down the downhill and just have an absolute blast coming down the hills. And I fought the Stryd Footpod. I was like really happy. I'm like, you got to have something like this if you're doing a lot of climbing or a terrain where it's a lot of up and down and you're not exactly sure how to pace yourself. Like I don't know how to pace myself on hilly terrain. It's an invaluable tool. I think it's absolutely great to have. But it's only valuable if you know your historical data and run with it other times too, like on your run commutes, your daily running, your weekly running, so you know kind of like what the number, so that way the numbers mean something to you. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is this tunnel marathon that I recently ran on. And Stryd had much more data on me at that point, and it kind of gave me the race predictors for the marathon based on my 8K performance at Shamrock Shuffle, that I should run at about 2:45. For my marathon in order to perform well. And I felt like that was a little bit low in terms of what I thought I could do. So my goal going into the race was to run about 250 in terms of the power or the amount I was exerting myself for the race. And I ended up getting super excited. If you guys watched my tunnel marathon recap, you know, I got overexcited and I made some kind of rookie type mistakes where I went way too hard out on the first half and then kind of died a little bit or didn't have as much as I would have wanted to at the end. And so the first half, I felt like every time I looked at my watch, I was in like the 260s or way above what I should have been. And then at the end of the race, when I was feeling like I was really dragging my feet, figuratively, not literally, maybe literally, but I felt like the effort, the best efforts I could give were only resulting in power meter readings in the 230s. So I felt like I just didn't have anything left at the end. So I feel like if I'd been a little bit more consistent, whether I'd been at 250, 255, or even 245 like Stryd recommended, I think that I would have had a lot more at the end to give beyond what Stryd was kind of predicting, and then I would have had an even better time. Not that I'm complaining. I had a really great result, smashed a PR on that particular day, qualified for Boston with this thing on. Overall, had some really great experiences with this little device. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any other Footpods to compare this against, so I can't say whether it's worth it for the money because it is a particularly expensive device. And right now, I think there's a 3-week back order on this thing. I really enjoyed training with this thing. I liked that power meter reading. I liked having it not on any particular day-to-day, but on certain big events, like days when I'm going to do some hill climbing on a long-distance race that I've been training for a long time. Things where, and on that particular race, on the tunnel marathon, it was a substantial constant downhill, which is, again, something else that I don't really know how to pace myself for. If I were going to run on a flat marathon course, I was shooting for a 3:10, and I would have run about 7:14, maybe 7:10, maybe 7:05 per mile. But with the downhill, I found myself in that race running below 7 minutes a mile, or even towards my half marathon pace, which is 6:50. So I found myself in like the high sixes a lot. And so I was extremely worried about that. But a lot of those times I wasn't that much higher over that 245 or 250 goal number in power. And so I felt comfortable running at some of those paces for that long too. So I don't know what I would have run without the Stryd Footpod. Maybe I would have run a similar race, but I feel like I would have run a lot slower race because those paces under 7 minutes a mile were really worrisome and felt too fast to me mentally. The number did. In terms of how my body was feeling, it didn't feel too fast, but mentally it felt way too fast, and I think I would have freaked out and slowed down a lot. And so I think I would have lost a lot of time had I not had the Stryd Footpod. So those are kind of like the main experiences. I think those are the more prominent or like signature experiences that I had with this device that I think kind of explain what I've liked about running with this and some of the things I haven't liked about it. And there's a couple of other things that I haven't liked about this device that I have some problems I wish would improve. The main thing is that this thing can connect to your watch with ANT Plus or Bluetooth. The Apple Watch, I don't believe, has ANT Plus. It connects by Bluetooth. And when I run with my phone, which I most often do, and for the Tunnel Marathon, they recommended that you do, that connects to my Apple Watch with Bluetooth. I also had earbuds in most of the time, and also for this race, that also connect by Bluetooth. And I have connection issues where I'll be running and all of a sudden I'll look down and I'm not getting data and it says connecting ... on my watch. And that's because the Stryd Footpod has lost connection with the watch and is now trying to reconnect. And during that interim, I'm not collecting data. I don't have data. And so some of my, when I go back and look at the GPS tracings or any of the data in Stryd, or when Stryd pushes to Strava, I'll see gaps. I don't know what the pace was. The mileage doesn't count, which was really frustrating when I was trying to hit those high mileage weeks. And I was like planning my runs by the 10th of a mile because I was just so tired. To lose mileage that I had run was really frustrating. So the Bluetooth connection issues are a problem. I've been in contact with Stryd support. They've been really, really great talking to me very proactively. Sometimes I'll post an activity and someone would email me or message me on social media through DMs asking me about what's going on, or can I tell them or give them more information about a certain activity. So they've been amazing. I don't know if that's just me or that's how they are with everybody, but their social media teams are great. The support teams are great. So some of the connection issues that I had have been problematic, and they've told me that it's unusual or particular to the Apple Watch Series 4 or the Apple Watch in general, I think. I think that has more issues than some of the other watches that it may pair with in Bluetooth. I didn't test it with other watches to verify or confirm that, but that seemed to be an issue. I also always wore it on my left foot, which was the same side as my watch. This is on the left-hand side, which some people in comments have told me that that's a problem, but I just think that's weird. My left foot is kind of my dominant foot. When I long jumped, high jumped, pole vaulted in high school and college, I always take off with my left foot. It seems to me like my more powerful foot. So it made sense to me to put the Footpod on that foot. So that's just where I always put it, and I don't care if it's the wrong side or not. I don't think that should matter all that much. I wouldn't expect that it would matter all that much in terms of a Bluetooth connection between two devices. And the frustrating thing about that connection issue is fine, but I just don't understand why, like, the Stryd Footpod still knows that I'm in the middle of an activity, like before it loses connection and after it loses connection. I don't know why I just can't continue recording data and then maybe backfill it once the connection reestablishes. Because, for example, I ran in the Under Armour hover shoes, and those have Footpods built in. I never even have to turn the thing on. I just start running, and it knows or it realizes that I'm running. So there's never a turn on, there's never a turn off, and it just collects the data. After the run, I just open up the Under Armour app, map my run, and it shows data. And so, like, the ability for a Footpod to continue collecting data, even though I don't know if it's connected or not to the phone. I don't think you need to be connected to the phone for it to collect data with the Under Armour Footpods. And so, like, it's frustrating that when this disconnects, it can't just continue collecting data. So that's just a thing that I wish that they could somehow fix. But that's really the main problem that I've had with this, is just that connection issue problem. Other than that, it's been really great to run with. Battery life is pretty much epic. I've managed to not lose the charger. It's a tiny little plastic piece that has a micro USB port in it, and I was certain that I was going to lose that, but I managed to not lose it. And I think there was, in the 6 months that I've been running with this thing, maybe one time where I couldn't run with it because it was dead. Would I buy it again? Yeah, I think I would. Because especially on times where I don't know how to pace myself, like hills, for example, or a downhill race, or if it's particularly windy, I think that the power number is really useful to have in terms of guidance of how hard am I really working? Am I working too hard? Or what's really going on with me as I'm running? And so it's a nice number that I enjoy having. So those are my thoughts on the Stryd Footpod after 1,000 miles with it. Feel free to ask any additional questions in the comments. I'd love to talk to you guys down there. But before I go, I want to remind you about our charity runner for the week. This week's charity runner is David Yeung, who's going to be raising money for Children with Cancer UK. And he's going to be raising money ahead of the Asics 10K in London that's coming up in, I think, about a month or so from now, or less than a month. So I've donated $70 to his fundraising efforts, and I'll post links in the description in case you'd like to learn more. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Yo, what's going on?